Okay, I think we'll get started. Welcome to the What to Expect at Summer School webinar for 2026. My name's Kit Greenhill. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Skills Development Lead at the HASS and Indigenous Research Data Commons here at the ARDC. I'll be introducing the other speakers as they talk to you. So I'm going to start off, of course, by acknowledging that I'm coming from the land of the Kaurna peoples and pay my respects to elders past and present and anybody with Indigenous heritage who's on our session today. We acknowledge elders, we acknowledge the continuing connection to land and that sovereignty was never ceded. If you'd like to say where you're coming from, do feel free to put it into the chat. Okay, so today this session is being recorded. It's going to be put up on our YouTube channel, so if you miss anything, you can watch it a little later. We'll email you when it's available. We also want to make sure that everybody is acting with respect to each other, so we do have a code of conduct which people are linked to when they join up, so you can follow that up. So today, you'll probably hear from two groups. You've either already registered for summer school, in which case you can meet our lovely workshop leaders. You can find out a bit more about what you're doing. We're going to demystify a few key terms and you get a chance to ask questions. The other lot of people, I think they're probably thinking about registering. So you can find out about what summer school's about and you can ask the questions that will sort of help you decide to join us. So today, what we're going to start with is, so what is the HASS and Indigenous Research Data Commons anyhow? What's that name in the title of summer school? What is summer school? What's going to happen this year? What it's like to attend summer school. We've got Madeleine with us who has been to 2 summer schools, so she can talk about what it's like to attend summer school. Then we've got the leaders for each workshop stream who are going to talk a bit about what the workshop is, what it's going to involve, what your prerequisites are, what type of things you need to set up, and then they're going to define some of the terms that we've actually used in our description of the workshops. Okay, and then it will be over to you to ask questions that you need to ask about summer school. So, going to start off talking a bit about the HASS and Indigenous Research Data Commons. Now, most of us were in Sydney last year for the HASS and I Symposium, and a lot of us came back sick, including Nicola Burton, who's our programs architect for the HASS and Indigenous, so I'm going to talk a bit about her part. You can see the little ARDC symbol in the corner for the Australian Research Data Commons. We're the leading research data infrastructure facility in Australia. We're funded by the government. Our purpose is to provide Australian researchers with competitive advantage through data. And the way we do that is by looking at our mission, which is to accelerate research and innovation by driving excellence in the creation, analysis, and retention of high-quality data assets. So it's not just about having the data, but it's about doing great stuff with it. And that's what summer school is about, is helping you do the great stuff you've got to do with that kind of data. Okay, so you can see the Research Data Commons words, which is sort of an interesting term. If you think back to the medieval times where you'd have a whole lot of houses around an enclosed field in the middle of them, and they'd be sort of doing joint agriculture because you couldn't have just one person doing farming quarter of a cow. That's the type of thing that the Research Data Commons will do. So it brings together people, skills, data across resources that are like storage, compute, software, and models. And for us, it's enabling researchers to conduct world-class data-intensive research. So at the Australian Research Data Commons, we can't boil the ocean, we can't do everything. So what we're doing is we're focusing on 3 main pillars. One is people, which is medical and health research. One is planet, which is ecological and environmental science research. And the third one is where summer school is coming from, which is the HASS and Indigenous Research Data Commons. We started when in 2016, the National Research Infrastructure Roadmap had a look to see what projects were already sort of ready to create something in this area. So what we do is, in collaboration with Indigenous Australians, the research community, industry and government, we're harnessing research data to enhance Australian social and cultural well-being and to help Australians understand and preserve our culture, history and heritage. So that's what the summer school is all about. We're also about upskilling researchers to use data-driven approaches in HASS and to understand more about Indigenous data governance. So again, that gives you an idea about what we're looking at our summer school. We started with just 3 areas in 2016. So we had improving Indigenous research capabilities. We had the Language Data Commons of Australia, and we had a social sciences project. We also did a lot of work improving and creating guides for the National Library of Australia's research portal trove. So that's where we started. And then in 2023, with $25 million through the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Network, we have expanded. So now we have 6 focus areas. So we still have improving Indigenous research capabilities, which is building an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander research data commons. We have LDACA, which is the Language Data Commons of Australia, which is making nationally significant language data available for academic and non-academic use. We have now the Social Sciences Research Infrastructure Network, which creates social sciences infrastructure for research that contributes to a more equitable and resilient society. Moving on, the 2 latest projects that have arisen are the Australian Internet Observatory, which is research infrastructure for social data and digital platforms, plus the Australian Creative Histories and Future, which is looking at making our rich history of arts data more available for Australian researchers. Across that, we've got Connections, which is the Community Data Lab, which is looking at using data from galleries, libraries, archives and other collections, plus summer school. So that's what we're looking at. But you are going to hear these words over and over again. You're going to hear LDACA, IRC, SSRN. Okay, there's these different focus areas are presenting different workshops, they're presenting case studies. They are the people, they are the researchers who are doing the stuff, who are going to help you to use the stuff. So that's sort of who's sort of running the summer school. So I'm going to sort of put my own hat back on and talk about what's going to happen at summer school. So this year, it's at Federation University, the School of Mines campus in Ballarat. It's 90 minutes drive or car from Melbourne CBD. And somebody asked on Eventbrite, how do I get there? So we've got a link that we can push out sort of about the ways that you can get there. I think I'm going to be taking the train down. It's on the 3rd, Tuesday the 3rd and Wednesday the 4th of February. So in between that sweet break between Australia Day and semester starting. Here's a link to registration. You will see that again, don't worry, okay? But there is online registration. Registrations are open now. I encourage you to tell your friends to come and play with us. Okay, so what friends would that be? We're aimed at higher degree research students and at early career researchers. And that's in 4 areas: humanities, arts, social sciences, and Indigenous studies. Okay, so that's who we're actually aiming for. To make it a bit easier to get to Ballarat, we do have travel bursaries for people who live quite a way out of Ballarat in other states. They need to be HDRs or ECRs. They need to be working in HASS and Indigenous studies. There needs to show a skills need. They need to show a financial need. There's 8 bursaries of $800. They close on the 6th of January and the outcomes come out on the 13th of January. So if you need a little other incentive to sort of come down and play with us at Ballarat, do consider the travel bursaries. There's a link to the bursaries, but again, that's on the registration at Eventbrite. Okay, so once you get there, what are you going to do? So to me, this is the key to summer school, is there's experience, knowledge and enthusiasm in the room. And so the idea is that you're not going to be talked at. So we're going to meet, we're going to chat, we're going to share, we're going to learn, inspire, challenge, mentor, and then go away and make and do. And that's the idea, is that it's hands-on. We found last year that there was a really lovely environment where the mentors were able to ask questions of the attendees of mentors, and they felt like they could ask questions that maybe in other venues they were sort of a bit shy to ask, because they built up such lovely relationships with each other. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're actually making it all about the attendees getting what they need out of the event. So you'll be able to share about your research. You'll be able to share and say, this is what I need to know to do my research. And as long as it's in the ballpark of what we're doing, that's sort of where we're going to be going. So we're starting on the first day, right up before we do anything else, with a setting on about 45 minutes on Indigenous context for data. So talking about the importance context that all the data we're using is somehow it's on Indigenous land, what we need to do to show extra respect, to use data well, that, you know, we're on Indigenous land. Okay, day 2, we're looking at some case studies. So we've got from cultural data to creative spark, the shock of the new in Adelaide. That's looking at how data about performance, historical data about performance in Adelaide, they pulled out the most sort of shocking reviews, and then they actually put them on the stage with some third-year students, so about that case study. And then the second case study is about building text and image extraction pipelines, things like when you've got botanical books and you've got a sample here, you've got text here, how do you pull that out using AI to make it into something that's actually really usable digitally? So that's those 2 projects that we're going to talk about case studies. We've also got, at the end of the first day, we let the participants take over for an hour. They can say, this is what I want to do, as long as it's sort of within the ballpark of summer school. So we provide the rooms, the tech, and a mentor. We provide a little place where you can say, well, this is kind of what I'm interested in doing, and we decide before afternoon tea what's going to run. If you want to know what type of things, well, last year we had a yarning circle about working respectfully with Aboriginal people. We had HDR students just stood up and said, this is what I'm researching, and shared what their research topics were. People shared about the AI tools they were using. Another session was looking at Indigenous representation in media, and one of the students showed a movie that he was making. And another one, and this is one of the reasons, the really cool things that we try to do with the Explore and Expand sessions, is it grew out of one of the workshop streams where there wasn't room to talk about it, but people really wanted to talk about it, which was, when you want to share your data with community, how do you do that while still respecting individual privacy? And we went quite deeply into people talking about the data they had. So that's the type of thing that we're sort of wanting to have in Explore and Expand. So it was a lot of fun and really, really useful last year. And of course, where we're going next, the workshops. Okay, the workshops are the backbone of what we're doing. So what we do is, when you sign up, we get you to choose one stream of 4 workshops. Each workshop is 90 minutes, so you get plenty of time to sort of get into it. They're run concurrently. And what we've done is we've set it up so that each session builds on the last. So the 4 workshop streams are roughly, they've got longer titles: Indigenous data, making your data more sustainable, social media data, and using R for administrative data. Okay, so they're the 4 main streams. So you can choose one of those. You are very welcome to swap between streams. However, our first workshop, what we're going to do is, we're presuming quite a low knowledge. We're going to find out who's in the room, what they want to know. We're going to make sure everybody's on the same page. So all the tech and login that you need, we've set up in that first workshop. We talk about how the workshops fit together. We talk about foundational concepts. Okay, so the idea is that you might be quite lost or feeling quite unsure. You can find out where to get all your materials, what you need to know. We identify who's maybe a bit more advanced, who needs a bit more help. We can set people up with mentors in that. So we really set things up in that first workshop, because from workshops 2 to 4, you are going to hit the ground running and you're not going to stop. Okay, so that's the way that we've done it. So you're very welcome to swap workshops in the streams, but we will presume that you have done that first workshop where we sort of got everybody up and on the same page. Now, don't be that sort of daunted by that hit the ground running thing, because there are lots of helpers. You can ask lots of questions. We found last year that actually people started supporting each other and they were answering each other's questions quite nicely in the breaks and in the sessions. And you can request extra in Explore and Expand if you still feel like you're sort of lagging behind or there's something that you really need to know before you look at the workshops on the next day. You can use that Explore and Expand to actually ask that kind of stuff. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to Madeleine Clews, who's now working at UWA, to talk about her experience about what it's like to attend summer school.
Thank you, Kit. Great overview. So as Kit mentioned, I have actually attended not one, but two ARD summer schools. Oh, and by the way, I'm on Kulin Nation here, but my home base is Perth on Noongar, and I also acknowledge the traditional owners of that land and pay my respect to their elders, past and present. So yes, I've been to two summer schools. The first one I attended in 2024, and I was going to the end of my PhD research. And then I was lucky to be able to attend again this year, and I was sponsored to attend alongside three of my PhD colleagues from UWA, which was fantastic. We're all in linguistics. We're linguists in UWA's language lab. Anyway, when I first attended, I was getting towards the end of my PhD research, and this year I was kind of deep in the final throes of writing up. And now my PhD is finished, and I am shifting from the HDR mode into the ECR, early career researcher mode, and still, maybe more than ever before, these questions about how we best and most ethically and most usefully and most safely manage our data are more important and more pressing than they ever were. And what I've found at ARDC is an amazing opportunity to meet so many other researchers like myself, and we're all in the same boat. And when Kit mentioned these participant-driven, participant-led sort of elements in the summer schools, this is really important because you really do feel like you are among peers and you are equals and you can safely talk and discuss and bring things up, and there is no such thing as a silly question, and you have so much shared, so much in common with the other people who are participating and the people who are mentoring. So just to explain a bit better, a lot of people who were doing PhDs like me will have started out in year one kind of in a panic to get sorted out, and we all have to do a data management plan, a part of getting underway with our research. And I think a lot of us, I certainly did, do this by shortcutting our way through a kind of series of tick box exercises using pro formas provided by university libraries and so on. And it's not a time when we're really properly equipped to think deeply and reflectively about what's going to happen to this information that we are collecting and carefully curating and analyzing. It's only after you've been doing that, if you've been in action for a couple of years, that it starts to get real. Now, I don't have a slide, but I was thinking if I did provide a slide for this series, that it would be some kind of screenshot of the automated emails I started to get once I clicked on the submit button from my thesis, because it was within a matter of days, actually maybe even hours in some case, I started getting automated messages saying, "Congratulations on finishing your PhD. Can you please return your university issued computer? And can you please vacate your office? And access to your university email will continue for a further 12 months." Now, it really brought home to me. I was very lucky to have been properly equipped by the summer schools I'd been to not be completely freaked out by this, but to realize that all materials that you accumulate in the unfolding of your PhD in whatever OneDrive space is provided by the uni or wherever are not necessarily always going to be available to the researcher, the person who did all the curating, via their institutions, and there are an awful lot of nomadic researchers carrying their data around with them on portable hard drives. So, what are the options? It was really helpful at ARDC summer schools to meet other researchers and find out how they deal with this very issue. We all have our own unique stories and challenges with what we're doing, but somehow we all have pretty much the same story going on. So the summer school really gives some clarity about how we can prepare for these situations. And I think the take-home message is really that there is a big gap. There's two poles between the kind of ideal model where your data are securely stored somewhere stable in a future-proof format and accessible to all researchers in principle in compliance with the fair and care principles that you'll hear about soon, I think, and in accordance with all the ethical considerations and with the custodianship of the data clearly documented and observed, and all those things closed off. And the reality is a bunch of researchers carrying their files around on portable disks ARDC helps us actually find somewhere in between those poles, and we all end up doing the best we can, but it's a whole lot better for the fact that we can come together and have this collegial space in which to work out how to do it. So ARD provides, I think of them as guardrails, like where not to go, what's not acceptable, where the limits are, and also guidance with actual tools, programs, platforms, ways of working, and how to use them. You get instruction in that as well. So those are the tangible things, but there's the intangibles as well, which is the wonderful contact with other people working in the same or different fields, the chance you can all talk about your research and data together and discover all kinds of synergies, how we can share all this in one big community of practice. And that's what the summer schools have done for me, and I'm sure will do for you. And it's absolutely imperative that you attend, in my opinion. Anyway, that's my 5 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Madeleine. But that was one of the things that I noticed was we had people who were saying, I'm the only one at my university who's doing this kind of intensive research. And they'd be sitting next to somebody who'd say, me too. And then they'd say, well, I'd solve this problem by going to this office. Do you have an office like that at your university? And it was very much people who in humanities who do data intensive research were finding that they were meeting other people who were doing things and similarly isolated. So that's one big thing too that I've sort of noticed that happened. Okay. Next, I'm going to talk about the workshop. So you'll remember, oh, no, I've got this slide up. Okay. So if you go in from the registration link, you'll see a link to the program which has got the timetable, but then there's 4 pages afterwards, which is a page each about the workshops. It tells you the title of each workshop, it tells you what you're going to cover, then you've got the learning goals for that workshop, and then a bit about the type of preparation that you'll need to do. Okay, so we're not going to cover all of this here because we can't, but if you want some more augmentation to decide, you can use that. Now, when you register, you do decide which one you're going to go into, and it will appear on your lanyard when you're at summer school. If you do decide that you want to switch streams beforehand, please do email contact@ardc.edu.au and we can flip you into another stream. That's easy to do. But I do suggest you spend a bit of time looking at these single page descriptions of what's going to happen in the workshop to give yourself an idea. And also before you pop along to the summer school, just have another read to make sure that you actually know what's going to be covered. And also in that first workshop, we are going to make sure that you're very familiar with that as well. Okay. So the workshops, as I said, were more or less Indigenous data, sustainable data, social media data, and R for administrative data. So I'm putting on another hat again. Andrea Clarke from the Improving Indigenous Research Capability is actually in Paris at the moment. They're doing some work around Indigenous art. What happens when it goes somewhere else? How do you respectfully look at provenance, at rematriation? And that's wonderful stuff. And if you come to summer school, you can talk to Andy about that. But at the moment, she's in Paris doing that. So I'll talk a little bit about that stream, and I'm happy to answer questions I can or pass them on to Andy and get back to you about it. Okay, so stream A is working with Indigenous data. They're describing it as a hands-on introduction to the key tools, frameworks and principles for working with Indigenous data in your research. It's got 4 workshops. The first one is that onboarding, and it's looking at Indigenous data, fair and care. And as I said, we've got some terms to describe. They're the 3 that I'm going to try and describe in 1 sentence each. Good luck to me. Okay, introduction to metadata for Indigenous data. So when you've got Indigenous data, there are probably going to be some important ways to divide the data up into particular fields. What do you say about that data? How do you say it respectfully? Are there vocabularies that exist that will help you describe that data in a way that makes it more easy to share, or it means that you don't have to think up the schema yourself when other people have thought about it? So it's talking about if you're describing Indigenous data in ways that make it more reusable, how do you do that? In the 3rd workshop, you'll have a go at actually creating some. So you can bring your own data, or we can provide you with some data, and you'll actually be just using Excel or Google Sheets in order to look at how you would create a metadata record for some Indigenous data and the puzzles and the challenges that you have. And part of the value of this is going to be talking through those challenges that you have about licensing, about provenance with the people who are running the workshop. The last one, the Indigenous Data Network Catalogue, is a tool that the Improving Indigenous Research Capability focus area is creating. And so you look at how you contribute using that record that you've created. How would you put it into the Indigenous Data Network Catalogue to make it more findable to other people? So that's more or less what's going to happen over the 4 90-minute sessions. So as I said before, the preparation is you'll need to either bring Excel with you or have access to Google Sheets, know more or less basically how to use it. Really, all you're doing is, here's the name of a field, here's how you've entered the data, so there's no special formula or anything like that. You can bring your own data to describe, or we will have some available. And Andy has set up a short reading list. I suspect that when she gets back, it's going to get longer, but at the moment there's just a couple of things on it. So that's linked from that sheet that I showed you. So do have a look at that reading list to prepare yourself for the workshop stream. So, okay, my 3 terms are Indigenous data, fair and care, and you're not going to only see them in this stream. Okay, so Indigenous data is data, knowledge or information about or by Indigenous people or impacting their lives or their relationships with the non-human world. Fair is a set of principles that research data to be ethically used should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Care is building on fair and looking at people and purpose of the data, particularly Indigenous data. How does that impact things? And so they're calling for ensuring that if you're using Indigenous data, it's being used for collective benefit of Indigenous peoples, that Indigenous people have authority to control that data, that it's used with responsibility, so understanding Indigenous ways of working, ways of being, and it's used ethically. Okay, so that's what the CARE acronym means. Now, I'm going to pass on to Simon Musgrave.
Thanks, Kit. In the very first part of the session, when Kit was describing what the Australian Research Data Commons does, one of the elements of the mission that she talked about there was the retention of high-quality data assets. And the workshops that I'm going to be leading in the summer school are directed towards working out what that means in practical terms for all of us. Now, you may think, oh, the data I'm working with is not that important. It's not a high-quality data asset. And you're completely wrong. Any data that people feel is worthy of investigation can be a high-quality data asset. And there are certain simple things we can do to try and make sure that we meet or work towards that kind of standard. Kit's just introduced the fair and care principles. And as you can see on the slide, the themes in this workshop series are about the basic ideas of data management in line with those principles. What does it mean to try and implement those principles for the data that you are working with? Click. So we have, again, 4 sessions. The first session will introduce the idea of what does sustainability mean? What does it mean to be able to retain data and use it into the future? Of course, part of this is reusability for other people, but we'll also explore the idea that this is just important for yourself. I don't know about you guys, but when I leave something for, well, my advanced age, even a few weeks, and come back to it, I've forgotten a lot of stuff. If you're going to rely on data that you're working with now for work you do in the future, You want to make that as easy for yourself as possible. So the kinds of data management organization principles we'll be talking about apply even if you don't think anybody else is ever going to be interested in what you're doing. But again, I say, don't think that way. People will be interested. So we'll talk about what it means to make data more sustainable. We'll talk then in the second workshop about the metadata that makes that possible. I think I have to define metadata later, so I won't go into too much detail at this point, but just to say this is the information that makes it easy to work for someone else or for your forgetful self to work with the data in a meaningful way. The third workshop is a very, very important topic, which is about licensing, about deciding who should be able to look at data, whether there are people or data that should not be openly accessible, what kind of conditions you can put onto those access possibilities, and how you record and document all of that so that it will be understood by people in the future. All of the work in these workshops is based around a way of packaging data, which is called RO crates, research object crates, and metadata and licensing are crucial in that process. And then putting it all together in a machine readable form is also crucial. And that's what the last part of the last workshop will look at. It will introduce you to an app which builds RO crates, which enables you to make the kind of description that is useful and is put in a form which can then be read by machines. Click again, Kit. Preparation is pretty simple. The RO Crate app, the Crato app only runs in Chrome and Edge browsers, so you need to have one of those installed. We will provide data that we'll work on during this series of workshops, but if you want to bring your own data to work with, that's great. We're very happy for that to happen as well. It can make life much more interesting. And my definitions, what have we got here? Okay, so sustainable data, I think we've kind of got that idea already. It's data that is usable in the future. It's still going to be there and it's still going to be accessible and usable. Metadata is the descriptions of the actual data that will enable people in the future to know whether it's useful to them or not, where they can start looking at it. RO crates, as I just mentioned, this is a way of packaging data and metadata together so that it's held together, can be stored together, and is in a format that's easily understood. And Crato is the app that enables us to create RO crates. It's a web-based application. It's just a user interface that you'll be very familiar with, and it's easy to work with, but we'll show you how it goes. There we go.
Thank you very, very much, Simon. Okay, challenge is over. Okay, so on to stream C, where I'll introduce Bogdan to talk about the stream C.
Hello, hello. And then, yeah, thank you, Kit. Thank you, Simon, for showing how to introduce, how we can introduce a stream properly. So I will try to do, I will try to explain what's actually involved in our stream. So we've put this beautiful stream together with a specific practical purpose. We will demonstrate how social media data can be collected from the internet and social media platforms. And to do this, we will not be going into technical examples of classic scraping, using Jupyter notebooks to pull some data from the websites and from their HTML and dynamic codes. We will not use any programming languages. We will not use APIs, but instead, click, we will use sustainable methods of data collection and analysis, sustainable methods for analysis of this data. And we will introduce a set of tools for that could potentially help you with these tasks depending on your research project. And I know there is a question from one of the participants on using this data in research. And one thing I can say is during the first session, C1, we will talk about actual examples of how data donation and web archiving can be used in research, how they can be incorporated into research designs. And we will try to contextualize our session in a way that it would be suitable to the research projects that our attendees are currently planning, currently running, whether part of the PhD program or whether as part of the funding applications at ECRs or as part of their postdoc appointments. And during the first session, we will talk about the ethics as well, about the existing workflows for working with social media data and what limitations researchers need to think about before they engage with social media, with these kinds of data. And then in the second session, we will walk you through browser-based tools to collect data, which is, we call it web archiving. We will answer the questions of how do we preserve specific websites and their metadata, and then reuse them for our research. And then we will install a browser extension and collect pages of your interests from a social media platform. And then we will add metadata and we will store it. And then we will explore their possible applications. And for C3, we will talk about data download packages. It's an increasingly popular, increasingly stable way to collect data from platforms like Meta, TikTok, or virtually anything else that complies with legislative requirements across the world. So we will discuss these as well, and we will look inside these data packages, what kinds of data they store, what kinds of information meaningful information they can provide to the researchers. And the third tool and our fourth workshop will cover a data dashboard. And then this data dashboard will enable us to look at what this social media data exactly is. So we collect all these browser-based data, we collect all these web archives, we collect these data download packages, but how do we actually study them? Is there an accessible tool? So this dashboard would be an example of such an accessible tool. And we will show you how it works, and then we will see what kinds of analysis can be done using this dashboard. And then to prepare for these sessions, if you would like to join, we don't really need much, just a laptop with a Chrome browser installed and a social media account. You could use your own account or create one and then use it for a few days before the workshop. And then during the sessions, we will explore what TikTok or Meta or Google data download packages look like. And then we will download them, we will explore them, and we will visualize them. Click. And I guess the last thing to remember to mention is our key terms. Those are not really complicated. So we have social media platforms, these online services for sharing content and for interacting with others, and data dashboard. And data dashboard is an online platform or portal that provides the functionality to see, explore, and manipulate and export data in different formats. So I guess that's Stream C. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bogdan. And you would have noticed my deliberate accidental, I copied and pasted slides, and for a while it looked like you were describing Simon's workshop. I apologize for that. Okay, on to Stream D, where we have Matt Curry, who's going to talk about Stream D.
Hi, I'm Matthew Curry, and I'm a research fellow at University of Queensland and part of the Social Science Research Infrastructure Network. Maybe the next slide, Kit. So the kind of stream that I'll be leading with my colleague Manoush, who's on the call also, is about answering social science questions using government administrative data with R. And so we're going to use R, which is a software tool, which I think is also one of my terms as well, to analyze synthetic kind of made up government administrative data, which we'll provide to you because the real data is sensitive. but it will basically mirror the format of what the real government administrative data looks like. And then we'll think about how we can manipulate and then explore and eventually analyze these data to answer, a sample social science research question. Can you go to the next slide? So I should, again, I'm kind of like stepping on my own toes here, but administrative data, I might just describe it briefly. And there's all this data that are collected for administrative purposes, and some of that has been made available for researchers by the federal government here in Australia. And so, researchers can get access to things like tax returns, Centrelink records, higher educational records, and these are in principle full population level data. So like, my data exists in there, your data, if you're an Australian resident, exists in there. And then researchers can now get access to and use this data for research. But that brings with it several complications, in part because the data are not collected with researchers in mind. They're not collected for research purposes, right? So the way that you go about exploring and manipulating these data are quite different than what you might do with like a social science survey or something like that. So the first kind of session is just onboarding and introduction. So we will provide some synthetic administrative data sets for everyone, which you will all download during the first session. We will hopefully get you to download R and RStudio in advance, which are the software tools we'll use. But we can also kind of make sure that everyone's up to speed there. And then we'll kind of go over a bit about the types of data that we're using and kind of their pluses and minuses for social science purposes. The second and third sessions really are going to be I have one to explore administrative data. The third session is manipulating data. Really, we'll be doing kind of both of those things in sessions 2, 3, and 4 altogether. But we'll basically, over the second and third sessions, we're going to kind of come across some common issues in working with this type of data. So we'll do things like merge different data sets together. We'll kind of encounter some problems that we'll need to think through, such as like, what if you have two different measurements of the same thing that are actually giving you different answers? So which one do you use? Do you use both of them? Do you average them out? And how do you kind of think through some of the problems that arise from this kind of messy form of data? And then we'll be working toward basically answering, a kind of example research question, which will end up using regression analysis and kind of interpreting the results for in the last session. There was a question about, maybe the next slide, Kit. So there was a question I had seen submitted about for this stream, like, do you need to have prior knowledge, basically? And so the answer is like, no, we're going to start from the ground floor. And what we'll be doing in the sessions is actually like live coding. So I'll have up, we'll kind of build the scripts together. And so you don't need to have any prior knowledge. If you do have some prior knowledge, that's great. But we're going to kind of assume everyone is a novice, and then we can adjust up from there if we need to. So the only preparation that you really need is to bring a laptop and install R and RStudio, which they'll provide links to in the program. And just kind of make sure that you can get that up and running. We will provide, again, the data, so we'll download that together and onto your own machines, and so we'll do everything else kind of collaboratively and kind of as we go. Yeah, I think just the last slide. So the key terms, I kind of described most of these already, but so administrative data, again, is this data that's collected for administrative purposes. So, tax returns, maybe the easiest records, easiest example, or things like medical records, like every time you get a prescription, that's cataloged somewhere, and so it's all obviously anonymized, but then researchers can access it. So that's the sorts of data that we're going to be working with. R is a statistical program, and so if you have experience with Stata or SPSS or SAS, it's another way to analyze data. And then regression analysis is for social scientists kind of like a relatively simple method for modeling some outcome or predicting some outcome, basically based on multiple different independent variables. And so that'll allow us to look at things like, if you want to predict earnings, you can look at people's education, their say parents' education, where they live, all these other things, and kind of control for various factors while trying to figure out what affects earnings in the long run. And so that's we'll kind of use in our example an OLS regression, an ordinary least squares regression. Yeah, so that's I think it for me.
Thank you very much, Matt. Okay, I want to do them all now. So I'm just going to turn it over to people who are here who haven't talked yet. What questions people have, this is your chance to sort of find out a bit more. If you're sort of hovering between two streams or hovering about whether to come, this is your chance to actually find out more. I haven't been watching the chat at all, but Alan has been popping questions in the a document that I can see. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so that it's much more friendly and I can pull stuff over and have a look at it. I'm just having a look at the questions that were covered in Eventbrite. We've done the one about what you need for Stream D, something about social media, which Bogdan also covered. Is Indigenous cultural and intellectual property covered in any of the sessions? Not in depth. It's going to permeate the entire session, of course, for the workshop stream, but also in the first establishing session that we're going to have about the Indigenous context for research and data. It's going to be there, probably named, but we're not going to go into a lot of depth about it. But again, that's something that if people wanted to, we could do and explore and expand. If people had questions, expertise, that's something that we can actually discuss there. Detailed examples of how to store Indigenous data for Indigenous community access and own when working in research institutions. That's the type of question that probably that kind of mentorship would be asking questions of the people who are there. So it's probably going to be more of an informal one. How can I get to Ballarat from the Melbourne CBD? We sent out the link. If summer school, I don't know who did this. If we meet at summer school, please do identify yourself. If summer school could be summarized in one word, what would it be? I had a bit of think about that, and the best that I could come up with was yours. So the idea is that actually it's about the people who are turning up and what they want to know. So that was sort of my little summary. So they're the Eventbrite questions. I'm going to have a look at the chat questions, but is there anybody who'd like to talk on camera and actually ask a question before I go on to the written chat questions? Either put up your hand or just unmute and start talking. Yeah, Anastasia.
Hey there, I actually did put it in the chat, but seeing as I have the opportunity, hi. I am really, really interested in the social media stream that Bogdan is running. Oh, you've just said everyone is welcome. Okay, I think that's answered. The only other thing is, if I'm someone with a terribly old laptop, are there any like courses that should not do where you're like processing data on the actual machine?
Good question. Over to the stream leaders.
I would say for Stream D, you're probably okay. I mean, if it's as long as you could download RStudio, you'd be okay. We're not doing something like crazily intense or anything like that. So, I mean, I'm sure there is a limit somewhere, but you generally should be okay if you're you know, if you kind of meet minimum standards.
There wouldn't be any problem for streams B.
And stream C as well. Yeah. So I think as long as your computer can run an instance of Chrome browser, I think it should be good enough.
Yeah, and I
Great, thank you.
same for stream A. But thank you for asking the question, because you're not the only person who would have that question, and now we've answered it for all the different streams. So that's really useful. Thank you very much, Anastasia. Okay. Are there other people who are quite happy to ask a question directly? Because it's so much better when you use your own words. Yeah, Helen.
Oh, sorry. I just can't get my camera to work. There we go. So I did put it in the chat as well, but so I will be starting data collection next year. I'm just in my ethics application at the moment. I am an Aboriginal researcher. I will be researching with other Aboriginal people as well. So the data, it'll be all qualitative, but I haven't collected any yet. So will I still gain some insights by attending, or would I be better off waiting for another year? Would I get more if I had already started collecting data?
I'm going to hand that one to Simon and Madeleine, because Madeleine has had the experience of being a student.
Well, I was going to refer to Madeleine if I had to answer it and say, come this year, and then if you feel that you still need to learn more, come another time.
I kind of have to agree with that. I really would have loved, I didn't really know about the availability of the summer school when I started, and I would have loved to have had a lot of this knowledge earlier. It probably wouldn't have changed the way I went about collecting my data very much, but I just would have had, you know, I would have had the peripheral vision and the kind of forward thinking to kind of think about how I was saving it and where and so on and what's going to happen down the line. So I don't think you can be too early to get your experience of a summer school, and absolutely come back and do another one if you feel like you want further insight.
Awesome. And will it cover intellectual property?
Simon, that's yours.
So as I described, one of the workshops in our stream is about access and licensing, and intellectual properties, particularly ICEP, does get a mention at least there, but it's not a detailed treatment because it's a huge topic, and that workshop already has to cover a very wide amount of material. But it's mentioned, it's definitely acknowledged that there are issues
And
that need
similar
to
in
be
stream A.
considered.
But
I will be doing stream A, I would say, if I come. So
yeah, I think that the main thing is, but see, at the morning teas, you get to talk to Simon. Do you know what I mean? So that's actually the advantage, is that we can't set a workshop that's going to solve everybody's individual problem, but my goodness, you can talk to somebody and know what they know and know who to talk to, or team up with somebody and say, we've got the same problem, let's stay in touch, find out what answers you've got. So that's kind of the advantage. I think knowing the buckets to put data into and how to talk and think about data before you start collecting it would be invaluable. So
awesome.
yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah. I mean, you might want to do yourself a bit of a favor and do a test, pretend data, pretend that I talked to somebody and what type of things would they say. So that's something to think about. Yeah. Going on to Colothy. I hope I said that right.
Hi.
Hey.
Sorry, I'm just trying to work this setting. Okay. It's my first time to attend this, and I'm really interested. But my main question, or my main concern is, what if I were to, or I would love to attend two streamlines? Does it work, or will I be able to just attend only one if I'm attending?
They happen at the same time, and the way that we do it is that you get everything you need for that stream in that first workshop. So if you haven't done the first workshop in a stream, you're going to be taught presuming you have. It doesn't mean you can't ask, but it does mean that you'll need to do a lot of sort of, well, maybe some extra in the morning tea break to get up to speed to do the other one. Doesn't mean you can't. But the other thing is that we found that there was a lot of cross-pollination that happened, and the discussions that happened, it sort of bled across the summer school. Was a lot of people were so generous with what they knew that if you were in one stream, you'd end up talking to somebody at morning tea about another what was happening in theirs, ask questions, and they could say, well, that's really interesting, I'll ask it in my stream, get back to you. So that type of thing. I think you'd get the best by staying in the one stream because you can go deep. But by any means, if people find it's not for them to be in a stream, of course, change. Do you know what I mean? So, but
Yeah.
you know, it's not bad to have too many choices. That's kind of means, you know, the right things happening. But yeah, so I wouldn't plan on attending two unless you had a really good grounding in the second one, which will be a little bit more advanced because people will have done 2 90-minute workshops already.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Are there other people who would have sort of would like to talk on camera or? Yeah, Susan.
Hello, everybody. I don't have a question, but I'll be coming, but I'm a Ballarat local. So I wanted to welcome you all in advance to coming to Ballarat, which is on Wadawurrung country, and to let you know that if you are commuting on the train, it's a 10-minute walk from the train station to the School of Mines Ballarat campus. So it's very easy, but there is so much accommodation of all different price points centrally, but also around. So, you know, stay another day. We'd love to have you.
Thank you very much. And this is the welcome that we can expect at summer school from Ballarat. You know, I'm looking forward to that. So thank you very much, Susan. I'm going to have a look at the questions that Ellen has put into the document for me. Is the program locked in and finalised? Yes, it is, but we've got Expand and Explore, and you've got all the other things. So yes, the workshops are because, you know, people need to prepare, and the same with the case studies and the same with the prep beforehand. So yes, but we do encourage people to say what they need to learn so that we can make sure that as long as it's sort of within what we've prepared, we can sort of slant it towards people's ideas. Do I need to apply for authorization to use the ARDC data? Different data will be licensed. So generally we try to make it as findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable as possible, but we do have consideration to the people and purpose of that data. So some data that we have collected won't be available without people needing to have ethics. Most of it is very, very available. And Simon, for example, for Aldaka, how many data sets do you have that people can have a look at? Do you know off the top of your head?
We're close to 20 now, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So many, many, many records. So many records. So yeah. So you don't need to apply for authorization, but if you do have a look at the ARDC homepage and the HASS and Indigenous Research Data Commons homepage, there's a link to resources, and that will link you to a lot of our data sets and tools. Can researchers attend who aren't studying their PhD? Higher degree by research students kind of does cover the masters by research and DPhils. So yes, anything underneath, and I think it's going to be in more depth than possibly you would want for your level of study. And in that case, I would be encouraging you to look at waiting until you're further along in the studies to make sure that it is you are an early career researcher. Depth is fine. Do you have to be studying? The summer school used to aim at Indigenous data custodians as well, but now we have the Indigenous data governance masterclass, which will run, which ran at the same time last year, but it will run in about June, July next year. We're not having the same focus on people who are custodians of Indigenous data. So you need to be able to show that you're a researcher. Some people within their industries, for example, if you're in a GLAM institution, you are going to be doing research into this type of stuff, and you do need to know about data. So you are welcome. We do have sort of caps on attendance. So yeah, it is for Australian researchers. So how you want to define that, we won't look too hard at the card that you're carrying, but by the same token, it does need to be worthwhile to you to attend. Researcher based in the East Kimberley, not currently studying, yes. Full stop, yes. Okay, sorry, I'm just looking back at the chat to see if there's anything else there. I am going to wind up now because we've just gone 1 minute over that half hour, but please feel free to contact us at contact@ardc.edu.au. I'd like to thank you very much to everybody who's attended, both as listeners today, but also the people who have given their time, not only on this webinar, but are going to give their time at summer school. Very, very much appreciated. And it's going to be great. Okay, I'll see you all there. Ciao.